What is going on, everybody? So I am back today to talk about a film that a few of you out there may have heard of. And it's really funny, and I want this to be a review, but I also kind of want it to be a conversation about something else that I just think is really important to openly discuss. But today I'm going to talk about The Godfather, Part 1. And this is one of those films in, obviously, the film world that is considered one of the greatest movies of all time. When people discuss it, it's always on those lists. I'm pretty sure in the IMDb Top 100, it may be in the top 5, might even be the number 1 movie of all time. And I know Part 1 and Part 2 are both talked about and very highly regarded. And as someone who's gone to film school and who film is a very big part of my life, I had never watched this movie or any of the films in the trilogy. And so I'm really excited to talk about it. And even though this is a movie that has been discussed thousands of times, and everything about it that can be said probably has, I'm going to talk about the things that I enjoyed about it, which I think opens up a larger dialogue, which is, I love the film community on the internet. I feel like there's a lot of really good segments of it. I've been really lucky enough on YouTube and on TikTok to build a community surrounding the content that I create that is very respectful of each other's opinions, that when they talk to each other, there's no like belittling people or talking down to them. The conversation is always very intellectual. It always, makes me excited to respond to your comments, because even if you disagree with me on something, it's always incredibly thoughtful. And one of the things I hate in the film community and people that just love film in general is there's often this gatekeeping nature, or like this idea of, if you haven't seen a specific movie, that you can't be a true cinephile. And I think that that's such a stupid idea, because there's so many movies out there that may not be on AFI's top 500 films of all time list, might not be in those books that are like the 1001 films you need to see before you die, that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and that they're movies that I really want people to see and experience. That if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to look at you and say you're stupid because you haven't seen this, or you don't truly love movies because you haven't seen this. Because there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of movies out there that we all want to see. There's new release movies, there's classics we haven't watched, there's underrated gems that we haven't seen. And so all people get around to watching films at different points in their lives. And as film lovers, we should just be excited to want to know what people think about those when they finally see them. So that's my little short tirade off the review, but without further ado, let's discuss The Godfather. The Godfather Part 1 is directed by Francis Ford Coppola, spanning the years of 1945 to 1955, a chronicle of the fictional Italian-American Corleone crime family. When organized crime family patriarch Vito Corleone barely survives an attempt on his life, his youngest son Michael steps in to take care of the would-be killers, launching a campaign of bloody revenge. So I'm a huge fan of mafia movies, or like dark underground noir-esque films. I watched the A24 film A Most Violent Year a while back and talked about that in detail. The Untouchables is a film that I really love a lot. I love movies that explore this underground mafia, because the mafia industry as a whole is this thing that's very violent. It's corrupt. They're able to create all of this chaos to build the lives that they want to lead, but they don't lead safe lives. It's not like they're not constantly looking over their shoulders. And I think what makes these movies interesting is that they often create really complex character dynamics with characters that you can feel for and empathize with, so that when they're in this world, even though the decisions that they're making aren't necessarily the most intelligent when it comes to their safety or their family's safety, you have this really intense pull inside you of, I'm rooting for them even though they aren't always doing the right thing. And that's a really impressive sort of thing for a filmmaker to tackle, and you have to be able to handle it really well and very delicately for it to work. And obviously Francis Ford Coppola nails it perfectly in this movie. It is 100% a masterpiece. I 100% understand why people love it so much. From the performances, the cinematography, the score of the film, everything combines together so well to create this very unique viewing experience. It feels like reading a very great novel in film form. Every character is so fleshed out in a way that even like the side characters of the family that aren't necessarily the predominant players in the overall film all get their dues. They all get time on screen. Even a character like Diane Keaton's character, who obviously is the love interest of Michael, played by Al Pacino, and she's introduced into the film, and her screen time in the movie isn't a ton, but her character is still explored in a way that she comes into contact in this family and being with Michael and seeing like he's pretty detached from the family at first, and as things with the family start to spiral out of control, he feels the need to kind of step in, and her being kind of scared and worried as to what's going to happen almost feels like a reflection of how we as the audience view Michael's character, and like we don't really want to see him get into the situation that a lot of his family members have been into, especially Vito's character played by Marlon Brando, where he's been in this for a very long time, with all the people coming in, getting favors from him, and like building up this empire in a way that like you can call on somebody to do a favor for you. If you don't, they're probably going to get killed. And there's all these little nuances to how the mafia and these underground organizations operate. And I think that the way that all of these actors kind of play into their performances, it makes it feel very realistic and uncomfortable. And I love how certain characters fit certain areas in the overall structure of the way their organization runs. Obviously, Vito is the man in charge. He's the Don, as they call him. He's pretty much just the shot caller. He's not really the one breaking arms and shooting people and doing all those things, but he's calling the shots. He is the person making the whole thing work. But then you have Robert Duvall's character, Tom Hagen, who's the lawyer who is essentially making sure that they don't get into too much shit and that he's twisting the right arms. And he goes and has the conversations with people, essentially like greasing them up. And if things have to get worse, that's when they call in a different set of people. And the performances in this movie are just so incredible. Al Pacino has always been someone that I have loved. Watching this movie made me appreciate him as a performer even more. James Caan in this movie is fantastic. Marlon Brando is great. Everyone that shows up in this movie just does a phenomenal job. And the way Francis Ford Coppola structures this story, where there's twists and turns throughout the entire runtime, which this is an almost 3-hour movie, and it's like that. It breezes by because you are so immersed into this story and care so deeply for what's going on. And I think a lot of that is due at the beginning of the film. You're introduced during the time of this wedding. These characters are in a space where they're happy while also dealing with some crazy things in their underground world that not necessarily all of the family knows about, which I think is a really cool contrast to kind of introduce you to those characters and settle you into the world where they're doing some really horrible things, and you have to create some form of likability in them in order to stay attached to the story. And Coppola does a really good job at approaching that material so that way you stay invested throughout the runtime. Some of the shots in this movie cinematographically are so well structured. I love the very last shot of this film. I think that it is absolutely perfect, but there are a ton of scenes in particular. There's the scene everyone knows about where Al Pacino goes to the restaurant. There's the gun in the bathroom. The way that scene is paced creates such immense tension and anxiety in a way that I've never seen in a movie. It's so incredible. You can tell that a lot of directors pulled from that further on in their careers for ways to build up tension. A lot of it is very similar to, I personally feel like, the way that Alfred Hitchcock builds up tension in his films. It's done so structurally in a very similar way to where everything is perfectly placed. The camera is set in a spot that just completely and totally works to unveiling that information. And there's so much to love about this movie, and I understand why people love it so much. And I do think it deserves to be in the discussion as one of the greatest films of all time. It's one that I look forward to revisiting, and I can't wait to watch The Godfather Part 2 here in the near future. So have you seen The Godfather? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Either way, don't feel bad if you haven't seen it. Just get around to watching it at some point. Just like every other movie, at some point you're going to watch it, and at some point you're either going to love it or hate it. But if you have seen it, I would love to hear your opinion. I know that this is one of those pinnacle movies. I'm sure there's people out there who who don't enjoy it as much, but I loved it. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.